During the Second World War, we do know that Japan experimented with kamikaze attacks. And there were around 3,000 raids, but the vast majority of those raids ended up with pilots simply sinking with their planes into the sea. Very few were actually able to accomplish their mission and hit the given targets. One wonders what pushed pilots, young, educated Japanese men, if you like, most of them, of some type of elite, to take part in their own suicide. What was culturally that pushed them towards that type of inclination or to actually doing that? And when we wonder, we could certainly talk about the Japanese pride, we could certainly talk about some other cultural element, but there's a Zen philosophy that was pivotal in creating this myth that we should plunge into nothingness. So in order to reconstruct what actually happened, we have to go back to the cultural situation and to the Zen philosophy that propelled all of this. So we are in 1890s, and in 1890s Japan is living this sort of double movement. On the one hand, there's Japan, there's tradition of Japan, the costumes of Japan. They have been closed off for a long time, right? And in the 1890s, they lived this moment of tension between what is seen as foreigner, what is typical and hardwired in Western mentality, so Europe and the US, that is not typical of Japan, and that is forgetting the tradition of Japan. And in that context, we find Kitaro Nishida. Now, Kitaro Nishida is the founder of the Kyoto School, and he is able to do what previous Zen masters have not done. That is, describe a picture of reality revealed in meditation. His idea is drawing on traditions of Buddhism, Zen, and meditation in general, and is projecting this realm of nothingness. What is the nothingness? But to describe nothingness, Nishida talks about imagining this reality, and when meditating on the nothingness of that reality. For instance, if I say the flower is yellow, then Nishida would say, let's be engrossed in yellowness. Let's see what yellow represents. And in pushing on this line, what happens obviously during the meditation is that all thoughts are forgotten, are suspended, ideally. But all thoughts are forgotten and suspended, and you create an empty space. The empty space is the nothingness, but in the nothingness, not even the individual exists. So the absolute nothingness is an unfathomable place they cannot really describe, but somehow Nishida was able to render that picture. But still, there's a problem with that, which is, can and does absolute nothingness manifest itself in the world of being? And Nishida here has sort of an intuition. Can absolute nothingness be manifest? It's very much up to probably your interpretation. This is most definitely some sort of reminder for those of you who might be familiar, a reminder of Heidegger's philosophy and the idea that history is not a chronological series of events, but events, epochs, moments in history do manifest themselves. So if you're familiar with this piece, so even when Heidegger writes about technique, you will find that he will say stuff like, things like, imagine to be in the woods, right? And imagine that a storm is about to happen, and imagine that a storm is about to come. Then all you'll see is a lightning. And lightning is that moment of self-revelation. So truth, not as something that gets discovered, that is investigated, not as the investigation upon an object, as the rational Western tradition since the ancient Greeks has interpreted the truth as self-revealing. But Heidegger would say that truth hides itself most of the times, right? So that there are only moments, lightning moments, where the truth is apparent. And is that the truth? But otherwise, the truth hides from us. And so, if you think in those terms, okay, then can we imagine, that was the question asked by Nishida, can we imagine nothingness being realized into society? And Nishida here gives a spin to the story, because he says, yes, we can, through the concept of nation. Now initially, this is a very neutral sort of speech, thinking about Japan and thinking about the weaknesses of Japan, right? The fact that Japan is living this tension with the West. But soon, what is the nation becomes our nation. And we see that because Nishida would say this is the supreme archetype of existence. Our nation is the supreme archetype of existence. He would say it's the fundamental context in which individuals and society mediate one another. And in that sense, the emperor is the symbolization of our nation. And so the only solution, Nishida would say, is to realize that one must die. And what is death if not an immediate plunge into nothingness? When we analyze the letters, for instance, that young Japanese pilots wrote to their mothers especially, we do find all of those contradictions. We do find a fear of death, which would be absolutely normal. We do find this idea of plunging into nothingness. We do find this idea of self-fulfilling oneself through death. We do find all of those elements combined, but all of these letters, they always end up, you know, with a sort of idea or need for their mothers to be there, for their mothers to at least understand what they're doing and how and why they're doing so. Now, this picture is taken further by Tanabe. In 1944, whilst all the young Japanese men are basically suiciding themselves, Tanabe is sitting at home, reflecting, and he doesn't do much. He will later say that those are the moments of zange, of repentance. But even his repentance looks different. He doesn't really do anything, doesn't speak about the culture that has propelled to this moment, doesn't talk to the emperor, does not release any public statement, and that he will say that basically what has happened is some sort of moment of rebirth for Japan. And through that he has experienced all the limits of rationality, the limits of words and logical thought, and only zange, only repentance now invades his thoughts. But yet again, he will interpret the events of 1944 and 1945 as a moment where the encounter with nothingness has shattered his own rationality, and possibly, we might argue, young Japanese man's rationality or ability to understand beyond nationalistic point of views. Now guys, with that being said, that's all. So let us know your thoughts, of course. And if you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you want to comment, you know what to do. Go ahead and leave a comment here below. I'm gonna talk to you very soon in a new video. Bye!